We have about 30 seconds until showtime. We're going to be talking about capital punishment in the Book of Mormon and the restoration of the law. Good morning. Shalom Aleichem. Welcome back to the broadcast. This is Fundamentally Mormon. I am your host, Mark Lichtenwalter. The guest call-in number is 917-889-8827. That's 917-889-8827. You can watch live at facebook.com/LAZURUS1977 and friend me there. Follow me on Facebook. Also, you can find my channel on YouTube at youtube.com/user/God is my compass, or by searching channel name Messiah Ben Joseph. You can also read along with us today. We are in Blood Atonement, which you can find at ogdenkraut.com. Click on Read Ogden's books. Scroll down to the second link, and that's Blood Atonement. We're right around page 52 or 50 something. I know we're in that area. Anyway, I just read it a minute ago as I was reviewing this the rest of this chapter, but we're in part 3 today of Blood Atonement by Ogden Kraut, which is chapter 6. So let's just get right into the reading. Capital Punishment in Scripture, Part 3 of Chapter 6 of Blood Atonement by Ogden Kraut. Capital Punishment in the Book of Mormon. The law of capital punishment for murder was clearly identified with early writings of the Nephites. We read, quote, "Woe unto the murderer who deliberately killeth, for he shall die." 2 Nephi chapter 9, verse 35. And again, if a man murdered, he should die. Alma chapter 42, verse 19. I don't think that this particular chapter actually deals with what Nephi did. So in the Book of Mormon, in 1 Nephi, we see that Nephi actually found Laban, who was, I can't remember what he was called, but he was like a master over like 50 or legions or something like that. And he also kept the treasury for the temple. And he had something called the brass plates, which were a early record of the Tanakh. Actually, it would have been more of the Torah than the Tanakh. Well, I guess it would have been the Tanakh too, the Nevi'im and Ketuvim, because we do see that Isaiah was in the brass plates. Now, according to the Torah, somebody that did what Laban did was guilty of death, and Nephi, under the command of God, with direct revelation, actually was commanded to kill Laban. And this we find in the book of Lehi was for the crimes that he had committed. Laban committed the crime of stealing all of the house of Lehi's belongings, and then trying to murder Laban and Lemuel and Sam and Nephi. So in the book of Lehi, we see that, and in the book of Nephi, we see that that Nephi found Laban in a drunken stupor, and he took off his clothes and put them on him, and took the sword of Laban, and God, Jehovah, commanded Nephi to smite off his head, which was the capital punishment for what Laban had done. So, I know that there's a lot of people that are like, well, that was so wrong what Nephi did, and Nephi didn't want to do it, but that was the punishment for the crimes that Laban had committed. So, um, and I just felt like I needed to address that real quick. Of course, in the nations that we live in today, we need to leave those things up to the criminal justice system. And if they execute the law, then great. And if they don't, that sin is upon the nation's head. And we should not be doing things like taking into our own hands, um, keeping Torah in that way. Now, and the reason for this is because God needs us to be a light to the people where we're at. And if we do things that are contrary to the laws of the land, that in the fact of like taking somebody else's life, then not only are we blemishing and dimming the light that we could be putting forth as children of God, but we might be going into a dark place. And like, I don't know, I just don't support doing what Nephi did unless God specifically comes down and says to do it. And even then, you've still got to have confirmation of the Holy Spirit that what you're doing is right, because there have been many people who believe that God was speaking to them. That, like, the other day, I watched this movie about Elizabeth Smart, and Brett and Michael, I can't remember what his name is, but he thought that he was a prophet of God. Now, oh, going on tangents, let me tell you. Any person who did what this Emmanuel, Brett, whatever his face is, Michael Davis, I think, did to Elizabeth Smart, if you're a prophet and you think that taking somebody else's free agency away is a thing, then you are listening to the wrong source. When we fought in the war in heaven, we fought for free agency. It was Satan's idea or plan to take the free agency away from all of us. Any group of people or person in authority that seeks to impose their will upon you under threat of death or punishment, when you're innocent, especially like this Elizabeth Smart person, you're a prophet of Satan. Any men or group of men in any church or congregation who seeks to control the freedom of thought and exercise through force or intimidation, no matter what church you belong to, is working for Satan. In the war in heaven, we fought for freedom of choice and freedom of agency. Now, that freedom of choice only extends to your own life. If you're forcing somebody or another being, like a child, to be terminated in the womb, that child is not your body, and it is not your legal choice in the law of God. It is an act of murder. And there are consequences for that, which consequences will be paid for by that individual who is not repentant in the next world. Any man or woman who seeks to force another individual to believe as they believe is working for the wrong system. It is working for the dark, not for the light. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. I could say more on it, but I won't because I want to continue on with the reading today. So, and again, if a man murder, he should die. Alma chapter 42, verse 19. So if you do something like a murderer, he kills an innocent person, then he deserves to die because he took the life of that individual, and it's just for him to pay with his life. He took the life of another, therefore his own life should be taken. And that is not force of violence, that is justice. Anyway, continuing. Sin was as grievous with the Nephites in the Book of Mormon. As it was with the Israelites in the Old Testament. And remember, the Nephites lived under the law of God, under the Torah of God. They were Israelites from the tribe of Manasseh and of Ephraim. We know that Ishmael was an Ephraimite, and I think Lehi was from the tribe of Manasseh, I think. I might be getting those two mixed up, but it's one or the other. Oh, and by the way, if you want to see something really interesting, type in Bet Lehi, B-E-I-T, Lehi, L-E-H-A-R-H-I, in YouTube, and see some of the awesome videos about the, well, Lehi and his group left just before the Babylonian captivity, and Lehi was a very rich individual, and he had a compound south of Jerusalem where he lived with his family, and we know where it is. We know exactly where it is. It's one of the proofs that the Book of Mormon is true, and in fact, the local people in the area still call that place Beth Lehi, which means house of Lehi. So that's something that's really interesting that I would refer people to. Getting off my tangents, the Israelites in the Old Testament, it follows then that the punishment for sin should be the same. All of the laws of God or the Torah of God are instituted with blessings or punishments affixed, no matter when they are given. The law of God, or the Torah of Jehovah, or the instructions of Jehovah, are always the same. One of the Nephite leaders was a prophet king who taught them the law and the subsequent punishments that were attached to the disobedience of that law. Therefore, thou art condemned to die according to the law, or Torah, which has been given to us by Mosiah, our last king, and it has been acknowledged by this people. Therefore, this people must also abide the law. Alma chapter 1, verse 14. I just remembered. So in my YouTube videos, I have done a bunch of YouTube videos done by a individual that I know. Oh, now it's going to slip my mind. Rob K. Brother Rob K. is a Jew that converted to Mormonism, and he understands the Book of Mormon in the context of Hebrew understanding. And anybody who wants to go back and look at those videos, they were done a while back, but he does a blog. And it's escaping my memory right now, but I'll try to remember. I'll try to get a link on the video later on with that. But if people want to go ahead and read those, that would be great. If you want to make videos, that would be great as well. I have a friend who's actually watching right now that has been making short YouTube videos on thoughts and readings of different scriptures, and I really appreciate that. In fact, I wish that more people did those type of things. It's free to set up a YouTube account with the use of smartphones in today's technology. It is easy to teach. Now, if you read something that you find interesting and you want to make a video, please post it in one of my groups so I can see it and read it, or just share it with me. So some of my groups, I'll just give you two. I have a couple actually, but I'll give you two. LDS Gospel Mysteries is one of my groups that I admin. And also LDS Last Day Prophecy and Gospel Discussion is another group that I admin. And I really appreciate it when people make those videos because I like to learn too. And part of the reason why I do these videos is because I want to learn. I love to read. I don't have a lot of time to do it with my busy work schedule and my family and everything else that's going on. And I want to lift up people where they're at as well. So if I read and give commentary on things that I'm learning and things that I have studied, then not only am I learning also by just reading, but also I'm sharing and being a light to the world, which I think we should all be. So, yeah, and I don't know. I enjoy it, and I wish other people would to do more of these type of things. Anyway, continuing, we're on page 57. Alma also taught that it was not a sin for men to defend their lives, their homes, and their country by bloodshed. And again, the Lord has said that ye shall defend your families even unto bloodshed. Therefore, for this cause were the Nephites contending with the Lamanites to defend themselves and their families and their lands, their country and their rights and their religion. Alma chapter 43, verse 47. And now behold, we will resist wickedness even unto bloodshed. We would not shed the blood of the Lamanites if they would stay in their own lands. Alma chapter 62, verse 10. So the Lamanites thought that the Nephites had done some great evil because Laban, it was either Laban or Lemuel, I can't remember. He should have been the birthright heir of Lehi after the death of Lehi, but they wouldn't just let Nephi and Jacob and Samuel and their families live their lives. They continually attacked them, and whenever the Nephites got wicked, then they got attacked more by the Lamanites, is God's way of basically humbling them. But anyway, I'm going to get off my tangents. That'll never happen, by the way. I can't. When I'm reading, there's so many things going through my head, and I'm trying to focus on the reading, and then some things just come pinging a little bit harder than others, and then I start talking about them and go off on my tangents, and that's why it takes me so long to read on these videos. So there are certain inalienable or unalienable rights given to men from Jehovah that are as precious as life itself. These must or should always be defended, even if it requires bloodshed. Therefore, my beloved brethren, Moroni, let us resist evil, and whatsoever evil we cannot resist with our words, yea, such as rebellions and dissensions, let us resist them with our swords, that we may retain our freedom, that we may rejoice in the great privilege of our church and in the cause of our Redeemer and our God. Alma chapter 61, verse 14. The Nephites considered freedom so precious that whosoever was found denying their freedom was speedily executed according to the law. Alma chapter 62, verse 10. The Nephites considered capital punishment a deterrent as they reasoned, quote, now if there was no law given, no Torah, if a man murdered, he should die. Would he be afraid that he would die if he should murder? And also, if there was no law given against sin, men would not be afraid to sin. Alma chapter 42, verse 19 and 20. Now, there is always a consequence for sin. In fact, the most simple sin requires spiritual death. And the reason why God gave us the sacrifice of the only begotten of the Father, the Lamb of God, was because every sin, no matter how innocent the sin seems, especially in our culture and day and age, that sin requires spiritual death. Because no unclean thing can come into the presence of God. So Yeshua, who the Gentiles called Jesus, gave his life and took upon our sins upon himself to stand in front of us and defend us against the justice of God, which requires the death penalty, the spiritual death. So God has made a way for us to come back into the presence of God. But every sin has a consequence. And one of the things that I have a problem with in this world, as an over-the-road truck driver, I saw it all over North America, specifically, but I see it on the news. People think that there is no consequence to their bad behavior and their bad actions. And though there may not be consequence in this life for your bad behavior and your bad actions, you will be held accountable for every bad thing that you do in the next world. God does not save people in their sins. He does not save people who continually willingly rebel against others and against God. He doesn't. As we seek to come unto him and do better and be better, then he forgives us as we do those things. So yeah, it's a works-based thing, and it is also a grace-based thing, because according to Isaiah, all of our righteousness is as unclean, filthy menstrual rags in his sight. There's nothing that we can do to earn salvation. But on that same coin, we do need to obey God's laws. If you, Yeshua said, if you love me, keep my commandments. Well, the commandments were given of old to Moshe, which were a restoration and of the laws of God given to Adam. Of course, like I've said before, there are many things in Torah that were added by King Josiah, and then there's a lot in the Mishnah and the Talmud that add even more to the original laws of God, even though in Devarim or Deuteronomy it says you shall not add or take away from the laws of this book or this law. Well, but people don't listen to that, right? So anyway, continuing on, I'll get off my soapbox. The Book of Mormon is another evidence that the law and punishment were consistent with those taught in the Bible. So this should have been a part 4, but we're going to continue reading. Restoration of the law in modern times. And that is the Torah. The Lord gave further light concerning capital punishment to Joseph Smith, and it was no surprise that the law was not changed from the previous dispensation. And we are on page 58 for those reading along. The Lord revealed, and again I say, thou shalt not kill, but he that killeth shall die. Doctrine and Covenants, section 42, verse 19. It should be remembered, however, that the church is not obligated to administer the law of capital punishment, because the kingdom of God is a political kingdom, and we do not have that kingdom on the earth today. The church is not the kingdom of God. The church is the church. The gospel is what is true. The church is, it's the gospel. When people say, I know the church is true, the church has changed. To anybody who has studied the topic, a great deal in the last 180 years. It is the gospel that is unchanging. And when the church changes the gospel, the church is showing itself to be deceitful, actually. All right, let's see. And when the kingdom comes, then at that time the kingdom will have the full right. But the church can excommunicate people, but it has no right to murder people. The church can tell people they're not allowed on their property, which they have done. I have friends who have been banned from church property but the church has no right to extend punishments of a capital nature or to imprison or anything else like that. And any church out there, whether they're fundamentalist or whatever, who does that, they deserve to be destroyed. The people who do that, like kidnapping in the Torah, was capital. It was a capital offense, punishable by death. Now, we don't have that in our society in this day and age, but the courts and the legal justice system need to be able to take care of people who abuse others, who kidnap others, who force others in a way where they manipulate or coerce or force an individual, force punishment upon an individual. That the church institution has no right to do those type of things. Even if the person gives consent, it's not their place. We're in the same system that Israel was in during the days of Yeshua in his life. Rome is in control. And anybody who stones another, like in the days of Yeshua, they had no right to stone him. Rome was in control. The laws of Rome applied to the land. And we in Babylon live in Babylon, and they have the right to prosecute people who are guilty of the laws of their land. So anyway, continuing on. That belongs to the laws of the land. Let's see here. The church is not obligated to administer the law of capital punishment. That belongs to the laws of the land or the kingdom or government of Jehovah, depending upon which presides. The Lord revealed, and it shall come to pass that if any person among you shall kill, they shall be delivered up and dealt with according to the laws of the land. For remember that he hath no forgiveness, and it shall be proved according to the laws of the land. Doctrine and Covenants, section 42, verse 79. In a written statement of belief by Joseph Smith, he also emphasized this same idea, quote, "We believe that the commission of crime should be punished according to the nature of the offense, that murder, treason, robbery, theft, and the breach of general peace in all respects should be punished according to their criminality and their tendency to evil among men, by the laws of the government in which the offense is committed, and for the public peace and tranquility of all men should step forward and use their ability in bringing offenders against good laws to punishment." Doctrine and Covenants, section 134, verse 8. Notice that punishment should be according to the nature of the offense or equal to the crime. Also, punishment is made for even their tendency to evil among men. Capital punishment is a deterrent. If it were not, then why do even hardened criminals fear it the most? Why does nearly every criminal sentenced to death seek to have it changed to life imprisonment? When the punishment is increased, then fear of the punishment is increased proportionately. We have 90 seconds left on the live streaming portion of the radio program. People who are listening online can either listen at they can listen at 917-889-8827. That's 917-889-8827 for the last 15 minutes of the radio portion. Or you can find these videos at youtube.com/user/God is my compass. And we're live streaming there. We are also live streaming on Facebook at facebook.com/LAZURUS1977. We have less than 60 seconds left on the live streaming portion of the radio program. Continuing. Those who seek to abolish capital punishment may cite some state with their low murder rate and no capital punishment. But who can say that if they had capital punishment, the murder rate would not even be lower? We're on page 59 of Blood Atonement by Ogden Kraut. For those interested in statistics, in the past 20 years, over 40 states have had capital punishment, and some of those who abolished it later placed it back into law. Also, the majority of all nations employ capital punishment. Without a just compensation for crime, we would turn our society into a jungle. In too many cases, a murderer who spends his life sentence in prison is released to murder again. This is proof that prison is not a deterrent for them. The late Paul Harvey said that in the past 186 men who were executed, of the last 186 men who are executed, not one of them ever committed another crime. Wherefore, capital punishment is a deterrent to crime. And that's something, people who commit crimes and go to prison should not be under threat of people who murder in prison. The murderer who is sent to prison should be put to death to protect the thief or the bank robber who is serving their time, so that they don't get shanked. You know, there is no justice for a criminal that goes to prison for a lesser crime to be put in general population with somebody who would murder them, which happens all the time in prison. If an individual is sent to prison for murder, they ought to be put to death. If an individual is sent to prison for something less than murder, and they're put in general population, and they murder while in general population, they should be put to death. There should be a deterrent for crime within the prison population to protect those people who may have committed white-collar crimes. I mean, yeah, they need to be put in prison for the punishment of their crimes, but they should not be under threat of death by others who would take their lives for whatever reason. So that's just, that's my take on it. And I know that the government puts certain people in general population so that they are murdered because the justice system didn't do whatever according to their. It should all be according to the laws of the land. So anyway, Shaw once said that hanging a wrong man will deter as effectively as hanging the right one, but it is not the purpose of execution alone to be a deterrent. It is justice and the administration of punishment equal to the crime. So if a prosecutor prosecutes somebody who they know are innocent, that prosecutor deserves whatever crime he's putting that innocent person away for. And that's something that we have that's just really wicked in our own society today. You've got these prosecutors who seek to put everybody in jail or get everybody to plead to some crime because they think that's their job. Maybe they're patting themselves on their back or lifting themselves up by the bootstraps, but I guarantee you, if you are a prosecutor who is doing those type of things, there is an eternal consequence. And as long as you continue doing those type of things, God is not going to save you in your sins. As you repent and make things right that you've done in the past, then you have, as you legally go about obtaining salvation by being obedient to God's laws and doing the things that God has asked us to do, like, being baptized, calling upon the name of Yeshua, those type of things. then you might have a claim upon salvation. But for the Christian to willingly sin and expect to have a claim on salvation is not justice at all in the eyes of God or in the eyes of Yeshua at all. God saves us as we do what we can to be better and to follow his laws more perfectly. And as we make mistakes, we can receive forgiveness for those sins as we turn back to God's truth. But these churches out there that think that all you have to do is call upon the name of Jesus and you can do whatever you want, and or the Catholic, what do they call it? Indulgences. That's not from God. That never was from God, and it never will be from God. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, and he doesn't change according to what you think. It's up to you to find out what God's will is, not for you to determine or to dictate to God what should be done. Anyway, I need the 2-hour programs, right? I can't afford it, but I need it. So anyway, someone once said that the best law is the one that prevents crime, not just punishment to the criminal. And the next best law is the one that punishes crime so that it will not happen again. No one can deny the execution of a murderer is horrible, but neither can they deny that the murderer is even more horrible. When the sacredness of life is violated, then justice by man and God demands retribution. A judge once said, the death penalty is a warning just like a lighthouse throwing its beams out to sea. We hear about the shipwrecks, but we do not hear about the ships that the lighthouse guides safely in their way. We do not have proof that the number of ships about the number of ships it saves, but we do not tear the lighthouse down. Edgar Hoover wrote in favor of the death penalty, quote, "It is my opinion that when no shadow of doubt remains relative to the guilt of a defendant, the public interest demands capital punishment be invoked where the law so provides. Who in all good conscience could say that Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, the spies who delivered the secret of the atomic bomb into the hands of the Soviets, should have been spared when their treachery caused the shadow of annihilation to fall upon all of the world's people? What place would there have been in civilization for these two who went to their deaths unrepentant, unwilling to the last to help their own country and their own fellow men? What would have been the chance of rehabilitating Jack Gilbert Graham, we're on page 60, who placed a bomb in his own mother's luggage and blasted her and 43 other innocent victims into oblivion as they rode an airliner across a peaceful sky? End quote. FBI Law Enforcement Bulletin, Volume 29, Psychiatry and More Liberalism. Psychiatry and more liberalism go hand in hand. The truth is that many of the cured are safe while under the control of guards, doctors, and prisons. But once they are out on the street of a competitive society, they usually revert back to their former self-expressions. I happen to think that if a person of adult body has not been endowed with adequate controls against irrationally taking the life of another, that persons must be judicially, painlessly, and regretfully killed before that mindless body's horrible automation repeats. Jacques Barzoun, Dean of the Faculties of Columbia University, The American Scholar, Volume 31, page 181. If a zookeeper would open the gates of a wild animal to prey upon citizens, it would be less serious than to turn a wild criminal loose upon society. The animal acts for the food or in self-defense, but a murderer usually premeditates for many unjust reasons. Those who plead the most for the abolishment of the capital punishment should visit the scenes of the crimes of murderers. And I gotta say this while the radio program's still going. We only have a couple minutes left on the radio portion. I'm going to continue until I finish this chapter. But it is my belief that when somebody is in our current system is found guilty of murder and sentenced to death, that there should be a special investigation that should take place for the period of 1 year. And if they find any reason why that person may be innocent, then there should be another hearing for that person. But if the special investigation determines that that person is guilty and that there was no reason found for their innocence, on day 365 of that person's, after their sentence, they should be put to death. And they should be put to death in the most painless and lethal way possible. It is not our place to torture an individual. That is Satan's. That's Satan's. To take the life of an individual, even if they tortured others, should be painless. We should dispose of them from our society. And that should be the way it is. But of course, that's not the way it is. But that's my opinion on it. Those bleeding hearts who have so much compassion for the murderer should see and realize who and what they are trying to save. Misguided compassion does not wipe away the crime or guilt. We should show more compassion for the victim than for the bestial criminal. Let me just say real quick, for those on the radio show, because it's about to end, you can find all of these, the full videos, the full teachings, the full text of what we read at Zion's Redemption Bookstore page on Facebook. Just follow there. You can also find them on my wall and in my groups that I'm administering, and on my pages. I have a page, Messiah Ben Joseph, the page, the Church of the Living Messiah, this page, a page, the Teachings of the Prophet Joseph Smith. There's a bunch of them. One Mighty and Strong page. All of these places, I try to post every day what the text is so people can read it for themselves, and also the videos with the YouTube videos, and then the live streaming on Facebook is on my wall every day. Every day that I do the videos, I try to make sure that's there. So, and like I said, until I get enough money to have the 2-hour programs every day, this is just the way it's going to have to be with the radio show. As soon as I get the money to do it on the radio show, we'll have podcasts, Fundamentally Mormon podcasts. Anyway, I'm going to end the radio portion of the program, but we are going to continue reading until we get to the end of this chapter. So thank you for listening, everybody on the radio. Take care. God bless. And goodbye. Okay. Just put this here. Get a drink and finish this chapter. I wish I could just read the chapter all the way through every day, even if it takes 2 hours. But I don't know. I guess there's nice little breaks in this chapter, how it's broken up. So, but we're going to finish reading this. I'm just going to get my little drink here. All right. Those who plead for the rehabilitation of murderers should first plead for the widows, the orphans, and the families of the victims, and show them compassion. At least in some European countries, a murderer is made to labor for the benefit of the victim's dependents. If that were the case these days, that would be great. Unfortunately, in the EU, that is not the case at this time anymore. This book was actually written quite a while ago. So, all right. Some argue that capital punishment brutalizes society, but the opposite is really true. A murderer brutalizes society. It is the murderer who cheapens society, and capital punishment is the guarantee against this brutalization. Page 61. Most of these abolitionists are the very ones that honor the laws that spend half the national income for the weapons of war. They say nothing about the consistent research in developing new weapons of destroying mankind. And this is why I have a huge problem paying taxes. I know, I'm going off on another tangent, but like I have a problem being forced to pay taxes to a nation that uses that money to enforce their imperialism upon the rest of the world. To murder innocent civilians. If people in other countries want to escape persecution of like Sharia law, they should leave those countries. I don't know. I just see our nation as an American. I see our nation going and forcing their will upon nations that have oil or other metals that we need for our society, like Afghanistan and their rare earth minerals that are over there. That I mean, it's just we've been in this war on terror since 2001, 17 years, and I see it as disgusting. There's so much blood on Americans' hands, and the fact that we have, under force of the gun, we are forced to contribute our money, our work, and our labor to support this murderous system government. It makes me sick, to tell you the truth. And maybe I shouldn't get onto those topics, but anyway, continuing. They vote for political parties that intend to arm their country with every conceivable weapon as destruction. As our country stands today, it is hardly the time or place to argue abolition of capital punishment for humanitarian reasons. As for the clergymen who join the fight against capital punishment, they are usually found in uniform, blessing the troops and their weapons for a bloody victory. Everyday police shoot at or kill bank robbers. Do these abolitionists cry and petition the police to put down their weapons or stop such murder? They overlook the robber who gets killed, but try to, and this is not the way it is anymore. If somebody kills in the process of a crime and then the police kill them, then everybody's out protesting about how horrible it was that poor innocent person who was really a thug got shot by the police. And this is the politics of division in this nation at this time. Anyway, but not in the time this book was written by Ogden Kraut. So we've changed so much in the last 10 years. It's just sad. But try to stop the capital punishment of a murderer. The opponents of capital punishment seem to be satisfied with any form of prison term for criminals as long as it avoids execution. They speak of the sanctity of life, but do not concern themselves with its quality. Of course, they don't speak for the sanctity of life when it comes to the unborn child in the womb. Consider the criminal who is sentenced to life in prison. He has nothing in his life to look forward to except living in an iron-barred cage like a confined animal. Here in a little cell with only the association of the most degraded and corrupt of society, he lives with foul minds and immoral misfits. It soon becomes a nightmare. One police officer told me that he has seen grown men in tears on their knees pleading to be sent to a different prison. And when that happens, there is going to be um, consequences for the prison guards and for the wardens of prisons who allow to allow that kind of society in prison. Prisoners should be protected, especially if they are guilty of lesser crimes from those who are murderers and thugs who seek to kill. Thugs who seek to kill should be put to death. We should not be supporting their life in our prison systems. Anyway, when Joan of Arc was sentenced to life in prison, she chose to be burned at the stake. Many men sentenced to life in prison would rather be executed. When considered, then consider the man who spends 20 or 30 years in prison and is released. What jobs are available to him? When he finds his wife gone away with someone else and his children grown and gone, what does life and society mean to him? And this is another thing. In Torah, people were released every 7 years, and if they were not worthy of being released, they were put to death. This system where these private prison companies make profits off of keeping people in prison and contracting with the justice system in the area to make sure people go to prison, that is also wrong. It's part of the wickedness of our unjust society in this day and age. With such a hopeless future, wouldn't death have been better? Life in prison implies that taking his life is too severe, but making him endure a second-degree death as intolerable life in a cage is a better choice, and they call that more humane. The Christian or Hebrew Israelite should be the foremost supporter of the death penalty. Not only does the law or Torah of God sustain and demand it, page 62, but so do most of the states. The Bible is the main advocate of righteous laws and the most austere law and the most austere laws against crime and wickedness. Law men who experience with crime and the law agree with capital punishment. Policemen who are brought into constant contact with the criminal are among the foremost authorities on the subject, and they advocate capital punishment more than any other group or class of people. And I feel sorry for those officers out there who actually have to deal with these people on a daily basis. I can't understand why they would get burnt out on that. I wish, though, that they would not judge everybody based upon the actions of the few. So a couple of months ago, I had a guy brake check me in my semi truck. I tried to pass him. He sped up, wouldn't let me pass. I tried to slow down as I was in the passing lane, not lane, but like I had to it was a two-way road, and there was oncoming traffic. And as I slowed down, they were slowing down, and I would speed up, and they would speed up. And finally, I was like, fine, turned my turn signal on and started merging into him, which forced him onto the shoulder, which caused him to be behind me, flashing his lights. And I don't know, he's like 100 and something feet back because I've got two full big old trailers that I haul, and the combination vehicle is like 100 and something feet long. It's pretty long. And so he's back there, and he finally gets around me, and he tries to brake check me. And it was kind of funny because he did that right in front of an officer who was sitting in the middle of the road. We're on a different road by that time. And the officer said, well, I see you guys speeding through here all the time, and you probably just came upon him and tailgated him. And I'm sorry, what gives you the right to judge me based upon what these other truck drivers do? I hate the way some of these truck drivers in my community drive their semi-trucks around. They don't slow down through towns. They drive like madmen sometimes. But that doesn't give you, as an officer, the right to judge me based upon that other individual's actions. The fact of the matter is, and I know I'm on my soapbox again. This is why these radio shows are so long, these videos. I have a contraption in my truck that holds my phone and one of my old phones. And on this one side, I have an app that records my speed. On my phone, I have another app that I have on all the time. Unless somebody calls me, then it turns off and I see the phone number and whatever. And that's why I have this other one over here, so I can see the digital readout of how fast I'm going, because I can't stand looking off the dash. I like to look. I don't want to look down. When I'm driving, I want my eyes on the road at all times. And as I drive, the phone's about like this, so the numbers are pretty big. So I don't even have to look at it. I just see. I see how fast I'm going. And if I have it set to, if I go 5 miles an hour over the speed limit, it turns red. And it goes, meh, meh, meh. That's me. Because I want to keep my speed within 3 miles of the speed limit. Unless I'm going through a town, and then I go exactly the speed limit. But this officer accused me, not even knowing me or who I am, of speeding and tailgating, and that's why this guy was mad. This guy, turned out, he was having a post-traumatic stress. He was triggered for some reason, and he was looking for somebody to screw with, and I was the guy that he chose. Probably because of the demons that control his mind. Who knows? But I am not guilty of what other people do. And for an officer to judge me based upon what he sees other people do, other truck drivers do, I have over 20 years of driving. I got my CDL in 1995. I take my job very seriously. I do not tailgate if I can help it. It is hard not to tailgate sometimes when people want to slow down in front of you all the time. But as I react to their bad actions, I back off. That's who I am. You got a lot of these other drivers out there that are not that way. And I'm sorry, but I'm not that guy. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox. The primary support today for the death penalty comes from law enforcement groups. That is, from the police and from prosecutors. Central to their position is the belief that society has the right to exact retribution from lawbreakers, and that the best way to do this with murderers and with vicious criminals is through capital punishment. They also defend the view that the death penalty is the only effective deterrent. A secondary line of defense issues from some theologians of the more biblical-centered persuasion. Whereas police officers rely mainly on their personal experiences with criminals to support their claims. These theologians rest their case mainly on biblical exegesis and dogma. End quote. The Death Penalty in America, pages 120 and 121. Some of the arguments used against capital punishment are that, number one, it is not a deterrent. Number two, it is cruel and unusual. And number three, it is discriminatory. And number four, life is too sacred to destroy. Unless you're a baby in the womb, then it's okay, right? Reason and research, however, will prove the following. Number one, capital punishment is a deterrent. The purpose of any punishment is to act as a deterrent. It follows then that the more severe the punishment, the greater the deterrent effect, the deterrent effect. This can be simply demonstrated in comparing the punishment of a 10-year sentence in one area to a 10-day sentence for the same crime in another area. Or if there is no punishment for a crime, it logically follows that the crime would increase. Certainly, the more severe the punishment, the more effective the deterrent. Too often, the people who do studies on capital punishment are the people who are attempting to create statistics that can be used against an anti-death penalty. They overlook, avoid, and refuse to accept the simple, logical, or most common evidences, page 63, that prove their criminal punishment is a deterrent. They ignore much of the demographic evidence. Some of these statistics were taken after 1965 when almost all states had a death penalty on their law books but were forbidden to use it. And so no death penalty was carried out. Thus, in reality, there was no death penalty at all. Such studies do not prove anything. Tautology is the interviewing of murderers to determine if capital punishment was a deterrent to them. The investigators should interview those people who did not commit murder to see if it had been a deterrent to them. The investigators should interview those people who did not commit murder to see if it had been a deterrent to them. It is only evident that those who commit murder are not affected very much by a law that is opposed to murder. Okay. Years ago, Japan had one of the worst narcotic problems of any nation in the world. In trying to solve this problem, they passed a law of capital punishment for anyone caught selling narcotics. Then they enforced the law and executions began. In a very short time, Japan had one of the least problems with narcotics of any nation. It is very obvious that when capital punishment is administered, the victim is deterred from ever committing another crime. Number 2, capital punishment is not cruel and unusual. Many arguments are presented to condemn capital punishment because it is cruel and unusual, using the clause that is inserted in the Constitution. But the founding fathers who wrote the Constitution believed in capital punishment and administered it many times. The clause about cruel and unusual punishment had referred to the kind of lingering punishment that they were acquainted with in England, cruel tortures and unusual forms of punishment, which were indeed very cruel and very unusual. They saw nothing cruel and unusual about a swift execution for capital punishment. What is cruel and unusual about deserved instantaneous execution? And let me just say, if I ever have to go under the guillotine, I hope that my executioner allows me to sharpen it, and I want to go first. Like when the whole thing happens with in the Bible, it talks about how they lose their head and all that. Let me go first because I want that thing to be as sharp as possible, right? That guillotine. And I don't know. I've never gone through that experience. I don't know how painful it is. I'm pretty sure that severing the nerves in the neck cause it so that the pain is basically, and you're dead, right? But I have tried to commit suicide in many different ways in the past. Now, when I lived in St. Petersburg, Florida, years of severe depression ended. And I have not been suicidal or depressed since that time, since 2011, I think. But before that, I was very depressed and suicidal from the time I was 9 years old because of the extreme abuses that I had gone through as a child. And I remember my mom, we lived in Okinawa, and I told her that I wanted to die. And I was 9 years old, and she sent me back to live with my grandparents because of how bad my stepdad was and just how bad it was for me in living on a military base with a bunch of military kids. And I don't want to talk about it. Anyway, Needless to say, I have scars. Lots of them. I have hung myself 3 different times and tried to overdose, and I've got scars on my arms and my wrists from severing arteries and veins to bleed out. And I've overdosed, and I should be dead so many different times. It's ridiculous. But I can't die, not until it's my time. That being said, one of my attempts of suicide actually came about because I accidentally overdosed on something called tramadol. I took the tramadol for pain and that I had been prescribed, and then I forgot that I took it. So I took some more, but it wasn't working. So I took, and it was bad. It actually relaxes you so much that you stop breathing. So I did that, and I had about 5,000 milligrams left. And I thought to myself, I'm just going to use this to end my life because I just wanted to die. Like I said, I had tried to hang myself several different times. I hung there for over an hour one time. My whole neck was bruised, my head was swollen, my tongue was swollen, and I just couldn't die. And it really upset me, you know? And so my last attempt was this 5,000 milligrams of tramadol. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is not for any kind of sympathy. Please don't send me some suicide hotline prevention. I am not suicidal, and I have not been suicidal for years. The only reason I'm telling you about this experience that I had was because when I took that 5,000 milligrams of tramadol, which should have killed an elephant, heck, probably should have killed a brontosaurus or something. You know, I mean, just, it's amazing that I'm still alive. All of my pain went away. And right before I fell asleep, I felt the Spirit of God so strong. And then I felt hands upon my head. And I thought, finally, I'm done with this life. And if you've lived the life that I've lived, you'd understand the reason why I wanted to die. Things have gotten a lot better, but it took a long time to overcome some of the things that I've been through. Now, for the murderer who should be put to death, it is not a cruel and unusual punishment to dilute 5,000 or 10,000 milligrams of tramadol and inject it into their blood, and let the effects of that drug cause them to go into a warm coma. I was very relaxed as I passed out, and I should not have woke up. But it was not cruel and unusual punishment to me for me to commit suicide in that way. Now, when I woke up 7 hours later and I had thrown up all over the place and I was high for 3 days, survived, right? There is no reason why I should be alive right now, other than the fact that God saved me from my own hand. The fact that I'm speaking to you right now is nothing short of a major, major miracle. Because I was called to this calling, and God was not going to allow me to do what I wanted to do to myself. He was not going to allow me to get away from what it is that I've been called to do, to be a witness, to be his witness, and to teach the people and to receive the commandments and the thus saith the Lord revelations that I have received. The only reason I'm telling you about this is because there are ways of capital punishment that are not cruel and unusual. And if there were a special counsel to take care of investigating every possible idea that this person may be innocent, and for that special counsel to have a year to do so, if they don't find any reason why that person should be, there should be, the guilty verdict should be overturned, then that person should be put to death. Period. Continuing on, capital punishment is not discriminatory in New York since 1930. 71% of the people executed were black, and 23 were white, or on page 64. Discrimination has been claimed because of the high proportion of blacks being executed in comparison to whites. But the disproportionately high number of murderers were black. Therefore, there would naturally be a disproportionately higher number of blacks to be executed. And I have lived in the ghetto, and I was a minority in Job Corps, and I don't know why, but in some of these cultures, life is not as important as their culture, and so. In certain cultures, if there's more murderers, then there ought to be more death penalty, plain and simple. Discrimination by such statistics is not a reason to eliminate capital punishment. Let me just say, oh my gosh. My wife's trying to call me, by the way. Oh, I'll call her back. Oh, I guess I can't. Her lunch is almost over. Anyway, if more blacks than whites are caught stealing, is it a reason to stop sending people to jail for robbery? Statistics are often dug up by the abolitionists of capital punishment by comparing one state to another, but such records are not valid because different states have varying populations, beliefs, and ethics and social backgrounds. Only statistics of the same state under different laws can be evaluated as the effect and deterrent factors. Life is sacred and must be protected. Some murderers are oblivious to laws or the sacredness of life. Consider the case of Stanley Haas. Stanley was from Pennsylvania and was convicted on a rape case and sentenced to jail. During his escape, he was stopped by a policeman whom he shot and killed. He then took a woman and her young daughter and killed them. He took another hostage, eventually killing him. He was later recaptured and convicted and tried and sentenced to death. But because of the decision in the Furman versus Georgia case, the death penalty was set aside. During that time, he killed 2 additional people in prison, 1 inmate and a sergeant of the guards. Why should his life be spared? What are the reasons for saving people in a society that they are destroying? If war is justifiable homicide, does it stop with individuals? Who in their rational thinking would spare the life of Adolf Eichmann, the Nazi officer who committed mass murder of the most monstrous kind, executing hundreds of thousands of innocent men, women, and children? To show his disrespect for the sacredness of life, he used the skins and tattoos of many of his victims to make lampshades. In 1967, the Supreme Court ruled against capital punishment in the United States. It was not being administered in very many states anyway, and was enforced in only about 10% of all murder cases. After this ban on capital punishment, criminals boasted of having no fear of being executed. A few states that had previously abolished capital punishment soon reinstated it. They reasoned, after a careful study, that it was a just and proper law for capital crimes and gave the following reasons. Number one, it would prevent murderers from murdering again. Number two, it would protect other innocent victims of being murdered. Number three, it would act as a deterrent to other potential killers. It would give society an increased safety. That's number four. And freedom. Number five, it would conform to the will of the majority of the people who want or demand a firm punishment for the destroyers of their society. Number six, it would establish a people or a nation on a higher, not lower standard of living. Strict law is not an indication of a savage society. Number seven, capital punishment is the law of God, and any people who obey this law will receive his blessings. However, we live in a time when capital punishment occurs less and less frequently. Among some states and nations, there are no crimes that warrant capital punishment. As noted by Bruce R. McConkie, quote, modern governments do not take the life of the adulterer, and some of them have done away with the supreme penalty where murder is involved, all of which is further evidence of the dire apostasy that prevails among the people who call themselves Christians. Mormon Doctrine, page 104. Both the Old and New Testaments and the Book of Mormon administered capital punishment upon the wicked according to the law, the Torah of Jehovah. The New Testament, the Brit Hadashah, did not change or destroy that law, and it should still be in effect today. Capital punishment is not an indication of a savage society. It is a means of protecting society from savages. Page 66. It does not destroy society. It is a means of purifying a society. God determined it that way. More than ever before in this nation, we need laws that protect the innocent, not the criminals. Page 67, Chapter 7, Death and Atonement. And that's what we're going to read tomorrow if I do the radio show tomorrow. So probably will. Thank you for watching, everyone. I know it's been a long hour and 20 minutes, but I think it's been an hour and 20 minutes. It's been about an hour and 20 minutes. I will post the text to everything that we read today at Zion's Redemption Bookstore. And you can also find this, like I said, at youtube.com/user/God is my compass, or by searching for me on channel name Messiah Ben Joseph, or Facebook at facebook.com/LAZURUS1977. Shalom, peace be upon you. Baruch Hashem, blessed be the name of Jehovah. And thank you for watching Fundamentally Mormon. Take care, everyone. God bless, and goodbye.